Let me start by asking a question, and maybe I'll just open the floor for a minute and you can weigh in. What are some kinds of special services that we are called upon sometimes to participate in as ministers? Weddings, funerals, baby dedications. What else? Holidays, so special Sundays, special services, holidays, graduations. There's all kinds of special services that kind of deviate from the normal path of our typical Sunday morning worship service. And the ones that I'm going to cover in this session this morning are weddings and funerals are going to be the big two. And then provided we have a little bit of time, we'll take a little time and we'll talk about baby dedications, communion service, and a couple other things. But getting invited into a special service is usually something that's, and again, there's weddings, there's funerals, it goes the whole spectrum. It's always a meaningful and significant type of event for a person or a family. It's not something that we hire out to, it's something we get invited into. It's very personal. It's something we take very seriously. It's not something where the minister walks into a special service and we're just there to perform a function. There's usually a personal connection, or at the very least, if there's not a personal connection, there's a reverence for the person that is in the ministry that's being invited into the special service. So let me give you some general guidelines for special services before we get into any of the particulars. Just a few general guidelines for pretty much any kind of special service that you might find yourself leading and conducting. Number one, make the service about him and them. Make the service about him and them. Our natural tendency as the speaker is to somehow, at some level, we tend to make it about ourselves a little bit. It's something we have to guard against. We need to avoid that. I, for one, whenever I'm doing a special service, I try not to be highly noticed. In fact, if I conduct a wedding and years later, they have to scratch their head and say, who actually did our wedding? That's where I'm aiming for. I don't want to really do anything that's memorable, because if I do, then I've probably done something that's memorable, not in a good way. I want the day to be about God and to be about those people and not about me. So I don't want to be highly noticed. Number two, second general guideline, pray for God's Spirit to lead you in your preparation for the special service, and for the Spirit of the Lord to be sensed in the service itself. Sometimes whenever we do these special services, they can have a ceremonial type of aspect to it. And we're Pentecostal, and we believe in the spontaneous and the suddenly there came a sound from heaven. Sometimes that doesn't match up so well with the ceremonial type of feel of a special service. But I want to tell you that the Spirit of the Lord can be sensed even in those kind of ritualistic, ceremonial type of settings of a special service. We need to pray for that, we need to prepare for that, and we need to make allowance for it. Number three, when you're preparing, prepare the special service for continuity and flow. Try to manage the transitions well. Try to prepare for any of the transitions of a special service to where it doesn't feel clunky, it doesn't feel disjointed. Try to prepare for a continuity and a flow in the special service. Number four, general guideline number four, do your homework. Do your homework. So if you're conducting a special service, and if it's appropriate, gather personal details about the people that are most directly involved in the special service. Gather family details as needed so that you kind of know the landscape of what's going on. Meet with the family. If you're doing a wedding or a funeral, meet with the family if it's possible. If it's at all possible, meet with the family. Do your homework. Another thing that means is be in the habit of collecting readings, quotations, poems, different things that you can incorporate into the special services that you're going to do that are regarding particular subjects. So one thing that I'll say later, and I'll say it right now as well, is if you know somebody that does special services well, pay attention when they're doing one. And don't be afraid to take something that they have used and to use it, to ask them if you can use it. If they formatted the service a particular way, if they shared a reading, a poem, an illustration, if they used a particular text of scripture that you thought was fitting, pay attention to those things, file those away, do your homework. You'll be glad that you did when you're called upon to lead a special service. Number 5, a general guideline for leading special services is always be prompt, always be on time. I know that may seem like, I want to be prompt and on time for everything. I want to be prompt and on time for regular weekly worship services, but I would say to you, so much the more whenever you're leading a special service. Most of the time, everybody's on edge. There's a lot of emotions. No one wants to be looking around wondering where you are. You want to be there. You want to be there early. You want to be visible. You don't want them to be worrying about whether you're going to show up or you forgot. Be a good communicator and be prompt and on time. Very simple. And then last but not least, a general guideline for leading special services, number 6, is special services are not a time to innovate. It's not a time to try something flashy or new. Special services like weddings and funerals and other things like them, they've been done with a similar format and a similar tone for years. So it's not the time probably to try something that you don't think anybody's ever tried before. I don't think anybody wants that in a special service. Anyone's got you conducting a wedding or a funeral, they don't want you to try out something new. Along that same line, when I do a special service, I would stick strictly with the King James Version of the Bible. It's traditional. It sounds like the Bible to everybody. And, you can do whatever you want on a Sunday at your church in Bible study, read from multiple translations if you want to. I don't always read from the King James Version exclusively during our worship services on Sunday. However, during special services, if I'm going to read the 23rd Psalm, I'm going to read it from the King James Version. And so that would be my recommendation to you. People at special services, people tend to like classic songs, familiar scripture passages, and if you're doing weddings, classic vows, classic points of prayer, things that are tried and true that they're used to hearing. That doesn't mean that you go in there with a canned approach and that you just kind of regurgitate the same old lines. There's a way to make it fresh, but it wouldn't be the time to innovate and to try something new and to try to reinvent the wheel. Any questions before we move on? Those are just the general guidelines for pretty much any kind of special service. All right, let's talk about funerals for a minute. Show of hands, who's done a funeral? Who's led a funeral before? Okay. When you are preparing for a funeral and you're preparing to lead a funeral, here would be the things that I would say that you need to consider. And this is not exhaustive. These are just a few points that I want to bring to your attention this morning. Number 1, meet with the family. If at all possible, when you're conducting a funeral, meet with the family and get to know them. Sometimes you'll conduct a funeral and you know them very well. And you're familiar with their family history and a lot of the dynamics of their family. Other times you're going to do a funeral and you might not know them, or you might not know them as well. And so meet with the family, talk to them, meet with different family members, and just kind of get the lay of the land. Number 2, I would say in preparation for leading a funeral is meet with the funeral directors. Meet with the funeral directors. Whether that's pretty far in advance, a couple days before the service, or whether it's the day of the service, meet with the funeral directors and just make sure you're on the same page with them. Make sure that they understand what the service is going to be like, that you understand what their role is going to be like, and that you don't end up standing in front of a lectern like I am right now, looking around for the funeral director, and you guys are trying to do this like mind meld thing where you're trying to figure out what one another's thinking because you haven't talked about it beforehand. Meet with the funeral directors, and it'll make things go a lot smoother. For funerals, make the service as personal as possible. Again, I said it's not time to innovate and it's not time to reinvent the wheel, but that doesn't mean you can't be fresh and that it can't be personal. Try to make it as personal as you can. Talk about the person's personality, talk about their career, talk about their hobbies, talk about their achievements. Find and point up the good. Most of the time you can find something good to say about somebody. There's all kinds of funerals that we end up doing for all different kinds of people. And if you do ministry long enough and the Lord tarries, you're going to do them too. And there's not one that's like the others. But most of the time, you can find something good to point up to and to comfort everybody with saying something good and positive about the person that has passed away. Another point of preparation is when you're praying, and you need to pray and be prayerful about your preparation for funerals, pray that the Comforter, the Holy Ghost, would flow through you. You want to be a conduit for the presence of the Lord. They're going to be soaked in emotions. And sometimes when you're soaked in emotions and you have all that going on, it can be hard to differentiate between what is an emotional feeling and what is a sense of the presence of God and the comfort of God. You want to be a conduit not for more emotion, but for the peace of God to flow through you. And so pray for that whenever you're preparing, and be thoughtful about that as you step into a funeral situation. Those are the things that I would say to you as you're preparing for a funeral that you need to consider. When you're actually in the moment and you're actually conducting a funeral and the practice of doing it, when the speaker of the funeral is associated with the deceased, it's appropriate to share some personal thoughts and some personal experiences. But again, you have to guard against making it about yourself too much. It's about the family and it's about the deceased. So at a funeral, if you know the person that has passed and you have a personal experience or a story to share, that's not the time to tell a story to make the deceased look like the butt of the joke and to make yourself look like the hero. Even if it's for a laugh, even if you're very close to the person and you kind of knew their personality, now's the time to make them be remembered in a positive way. And you need to guard against putting yourself in that place where you're the one that looks good in the story that you're telling. Just be selective about the experiences that you're sharing. If you have a time allotment that's given to you for a funeral, honor that. Honor the time allotment that's given to you, that's planned and assigned. Sometimes when you do a funeral, you are the main speaker. Sometimes you are one of several speakers that are going to speak at a funeral. Sometimes you are the only speaker. You're the one that's going to do the whole thing from top to bottom. I've done plenty of those. Time allotment is important because you're considering the timing and the considerations of the family. The family is grieving. You're considering the funeral home and the things that they have going on and the operations that they run. You're also considering cemetery time frames. They're expecting everybody out at the cemetery at a certain time. And so a certain knowledge of time allotment and honoring that is appropriate at a funeral. When you're doing the funeral, speak truth, but don't take advantage of a captive audience. Never do that. No one appreciates that. The family's not going to appreciate it. I did one just a couple of weeks ago for an individual that I did not know, but I know some of the family. They're associated with our church. And I took the opportunity. I was able to share truth in a good way, in a tactful way. But I did not take advantage of the audience. And you never want to do that at a funeral. That's not appreciated. So there's a balance that you can find there that you can do it the right way. And I want to encourage you to just navigate that with wisdom. How many have done a funeral of someone that you didn't know, an unknown person? I've done several of those. When you do that, you want to follow the general guidelines that I shared earlier for just special services in general. You want to meet with the friends and family prior to the service. You want to use familiar, and again, that's one of the guidelines. You want to use familiar songs, familiar passages of Scripture, such as Psalm 23. That's a good one to go to. Secular people that aren't used to being in church settings with a preacher and stuff like that, most of them will have some connection to at least the 23rd Psalm and songs like Amazing Grace and things like that. And just because they may seem like they're very common to us doesn't mean that it's common to everybody. They can be very comforting. They can be very appropriate in those kind of settings, especially when you're doing the funeral of somebody that you don't know or a family that you're not very connected with. One of the things Brother Williford had in his notes that I thought was very good and it's very practical is if you're doing one of those services and you're kind of at a loss for what to say because you don't really have a personal connection to the person, you don't have a personal connection to the family so much, That Psalm 23 where it talks about paths, that's a good way to personalize it, even for someone that you don't know. There's ways that you can personalize the message and personalize the service, even for someone that you don't really know, because everyone walks a path of life, and you can kind of expound on that, and you can be particular without pretending like you knew them personally. You can still give it a personal attachment, even when it's a funeral for an unknown person or a family that you're not very well connected with. There's also funerals where you do a funeral for someone that is unsaved, somebody who was not connected to the church, someone who's not been born again. What you need to do in that moment, it can be challenging in one of those settings. If you've ever done one of those, you know what I'm talking about. It can be challenging. What you want to do is you want to find and present as much good about the person as you possibly can. You don't want to make it a negative day. You don't want to spin it in a negative fashion. Usually there is some good in everybody. There's something good about the way they lived their life, or something that they were involved in, or the way that they treated their family, that you can find and you can hone in on and you can talk about. Now, when you're doing one of these services, one of these funeral services for someone that's unsaved, you can't be untruthful. And so you can't be untruthful whether ignorantly or on purpose. So for unbelievers specifically, if you're the minister in that service, your role is not to play the role of judge. Placing a person in heaven or in hell at the funeral is not a good move, especially when you know you're doing the funeral of someone who is a non-believer who was not saved. So, you need to be truthful, but you have to be tactful as well. You never want to be untruthful. So another point of reference just for funerals, but especially the funeral of an unsaved person or an unknown person that you aren't connected to, avoid, this is just me, not the Lord, just me. You can do what seemeth right unto you. I avoid opening it up for everyone's remarks. Unless that's something that they're just dead set on doing and they're going to absolutely have it that way, I don't open it up for everyone to make personal remarks like an open mic. You are opening up a can of worms. You never know what you're going to do. And at the end of the day, you're still the one leading the service. So you probably are going to end up getting up at the end trying to put a bow on it. And I just wouldn't recommend it myself. So if you find yourself in a position where the family insists on it, then you can navigate that however you need to. But if they leave it up to you, I wouldn't of my own volition put myself in that kind of a position. So you can take that for whatever it's worth. Let's talk about the actual service of a funeral service. Average time for a funeral service should probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 to 45 minutes. Brother Williford, in his resources that I will send to you later, next week probably, he has a sample outline that you might find helpful. I can tell you this, it's probably been 15 plus years ago. I sat in this session at a Missouri camp meeting, and Brother Williford taught it, and I learned, and I did some things. I went back looking through Brother Williford's notes that he sent me, and I saw, I do that, and apparently I was listening. He passed on some wisdom, and that's the purpose of this. We're trying to just pass on some wisdom. Listen, if you're at the funeral and you're the one reading the obituary, if you're reading that, be prepared. Ask, if you need to, ask how to pronounce the names. Don't get up there and just try to mumble your way through it, okay? You might do that on Sunday when you're reading through all the Old Testament Bible names and everyone will give you kind of the benefit of the doubt and they just kind of laugh it off. They will not laugh it off at the funeral. They want the names to be pronounced. I'll tell you a funny story. I joked a minute ago how I've had special services passed on to me for a number of years now at Bluff City. And there was one special service, it was a funeral, and a lady that was the wife of a man that attended our church, she passed away, and she was Hawaiian, and her family was coming into town, and we were having the whole service for her. Well, the traditional Hawaiian names are about as long as your arm. They're very long names, and they don't have a lot of vowels. There's just a lot of consonants, and they're very difficult for someone like me to pronounce. And I can remember Brother Elledge and my father, handed me the obituary and they said, "You're doing this." And I'm like, "Okay, sounds good, will do." And then I looked at it and I thought, "You guys must be joking." And I still mess with them to this day about it, because I had to do like hooked on phonics and like phonetically spell out all these names to get them right. But most of the time it's not that extreme. Most of the time you're dealing with, pretty normal names that you're probably used to pronouncing, but make sure you can pronounce the names and get the facts right on the obituary. It makes a difference. So that's all I'll say about the actual service. There's a format that you'll see on the outline that'll be emailed to you. If you're doing a graveside service, and a lot of funerals involve a graveside service, in my opinion, what I do is I try to make it short and sweet. You may want to have an umbrella in the truck. I've done a couple of them where I did not pack the appropriate umbrella, and you end up soaked out there at the cemetery. So just be prepared. You want to say something like, "We've come as far as we can go today." There's a finality to it. You're at the end. It's the end of the service. It's the end of the day. I usually read from Ecclesiastes, "Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter." And fear God, keep his commandments. This is the whole duty of man. And then you want to have a committal type of prayer ready. For as much as it has pleased Almighty God to take our dear beloved home, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. It's the time for that at the graveside. And if you're hosting a meal for the family, that you're probably doing it after the time at the cemetery. And that's probably something in your preparation for a funeral. If it's someone that's connected to the church, you probably want to ask the family ahead of time whether or not you'd like to have a meal hosted for them, if that's something that you're equipped to do. Any questions about funerals before we move on to weddings? Okay, we're going to hasten on. How many have conducted a wedding before? Show of hands. Conducted a wedding. Okay. So when you're doing a wedding, as with funerals, the general guidelines apply. So all the general guidelines I shared earlier, those all apply to weddings. But here's a few special considerations for weddings. You need to consider the responsibility of marrying somebody. It's more than just a ritual or a ceremony. It's more than just another ministerial duty. Marriage is a God idea. And so it is one of our solemn responsibilities to preside over a wedding. I would suggest to you that if at all possible, if you're going to perform the wedding for a couple, to conduct premarital counseling conversations with them beforehand. That's a good practice to have. This gives you opportunities to provide instructions to the couple. It's not a preaching type of setting. It's an instructional type of setting. You need to hold a planning meeting with the bride and groom well in advance of the wedding. So in the initial meeting that you have regarding their upcoming wedding, if you have any policies, whether they're personal policies or church policies regarding weddings, guidelines regarding weddings, that's the time to communicate them well in advance. So for example, let me give you a couple examples. If you have a preferred dress code for weddings that are held at your church property, you need to communicate those well in advance, because people buy wedding clothes well in advance. And if they need to find a different venue in order to accommodate their wardrobe choices, they need to know that. And that's an okay line to hold as a minister. That's okay. There's a lot of venues out there that can host weddings, and they can pretty much do whatever they want. But if they're doing it in the house of the Lord, there's, at least at Bluff City, there's going to be some guidelines attached to that. Also things, they might have questions like, "Hey, can we dance after the wedding?" And if you have guidelines about that, you probably want to communicate that. And I laugh about it and we kind of chuckle about it. But I mean, I've had those conversations in the last couple of years with people that I didn't think I was going to have conversations about. So have an initial meeting and communicate any policies, guidelines, parameters that are attached to the wedding. Find out who the wedding coordinator is. If they have a wedding coordinator, find out who it is. If they don't have a wedding coordinator, strongly suggest that they have one, because you're going to want somebody that can help coordinate some of the details that you can't be in two places at once to do as the minister. Have them present a plan for the ceremony. Most couples will have some idea of how they want the ceremony to go. That needs to be shared with you so that you can consider it together and you can work out the details of how that's going to flow, refer to the general guidelines. You want there to be continuity and flow. And sometimes people that are getting married, they're not used to putting together a service considering how it's going to flow together. And you probably are a little more adept at doing that. So you may see something about the way that they have envisioned their wedding ceremony and say, that is going to be all over the place. Can I make a suggestion and just kind of rearrange some things? That's appropriate, and you can do that. That's not something you do the night of the wedding rehearsal necessarily, or the day of the wedding. That's something you want to do in advance so that everybody understands what the plan is going to be. I said the words wedding rehearsal, so let's talk about those. It's a good idea to have a rehearsal for the wedding. Usually that takes place the day before the wedding. When you have a wedding rehearsal, you want to open with prayer, you want to gather everyone in, you want to give general instructions to everybody and communicate the plan for the ceremony, possibly having some printed handouts for everybody that's going to be involved. And then you want to arrange the wedding party into their appropriate places that they're going to stand. And most of the time, that falls on the minister to know where everyone needs to stand. So you can purchase a book, a handbook or something that has diagrams that will show you where everybody traditionally needs to stand at a wedding. That's going to fall to you. Don't count on somebody else knowing that. They're going to walk in and they're probably not going to know which way is up because they're going to be very nervous and very overcome with emotions and have a lot of other things going on. And so it falls to you to know where everyone needs to stand. What I do, and what apparently Brother Williford taught me to do many years ago, is when you're doing a rehearsal, you typically want to go through the ceremony 2 times at least. And what I do is I go through it once in slow motion. And I tell everyone what we're going to do. We're going to go through the wedding ceremony at the rehearsal 1 time in slow motion. We're going to go as slow as we need to go. Now, I'm not going to read all my remarks as the minister. We're not going to play all the songs through the loudspeakers all the way through. But we're going to go through the ceremony point by point in slow motion so that everyone gets a sense of where they're supposed to be and when and the timing for everything. Then, after we've done that successfully, we take a brief pause, we answer any questions, and then we attempt to go through the wedding ceremony in real time. And I tell everyone that. We're going to go through this the second time at the rehearsal, and we're going to try not to break and pause and ask questions. So if you have any questions, ask them right now, because this second time we go through, we're going to try to nail it. We're going to try to go through just as though we were actually in the wedding ceremony itself. And most of the time, that works. Most of the time, 2 times through works. I've had occasions where I have to go through it a 3rd time, and that's okay. But that's the wedding rehearsal, and it can be very, very simple. It doesn't have to be a complicated ordeal. You need to know about marriage certificates, how to fill one out. Most of the time, the county will give you instructions. At least my county does. They print off a little instructional page to make sure that you know how to fill out a wedding certificate. That's going to fall to you. You're going to have to know how to fill one of those out. I can tell you this, when I do a wedding, I don't ad-lib. I read my remarks. I don't go from the cuff during weddings and funerals. Now, that doesn't mean I go robotic and mechanical and I just drone on, but I do stick to my prepared remarks. I don't just go off on a tangent during a wedding especially. So I don't meander around, I don't ramble. I don't think of things on the spot. If I think of something on the spot during a wedding, I keep that to myself because that's probably not something that I want to include. When you're doing a wedding, don't tell stories that are embarrassing to anybody. Don't do that. Don't do that. Even if you think it's funny, even if you think you are hilarious, don't do that. It's not the time for that. They will not appreciate that. Now, I use, and maybe you do too, when I do services, and even right now, this very moment, I have some notes prepared on an iPad. Most of the time, that's fine. In this session, that's all I have. I'm relying on this piece of technology. I would say to you that when you're doing a wedding or a funeral, have a printed copy tucked away. You don't have to use it. If you're going to use a device, but have that printed copy tucked away. Because here's the thing. Your technology may fail you on Sunday morning. And you'll be like, boy, I was going to preach from John chapter 3 and I don't have any of my notes, but I can probably just go for it. I can wing it. I don't have, I can go for it. It's Sunday morning. It's one of our typical worship services. It's the home crowd. They're a little more forgiving. Friend, if your device fails you at a wedding, you're probably not going to be able to wing your way through a wedding ceremony unless you've just done untold hundreds of them. So have a paper copy printed and tucked away in your Bible. That brings me to another thing. When you're doing a wedding or a funeral, you are a minister of the gospel. Have a physical Bible. Be seen with a Bible. It's like, use your device, but have an actual Bible with you. It's not a prop, but there is something about the optics of the minister having a Bible. They expect you to have the Word of God with you. And I would say that's an appropriate thing to do. And even if you read almost exclusively off of a device, a Bible is good to have in case everything else fails, and you still have that, and you can go with that. So ask the bride and groom what they want you to wear. You know, if they may have a dress code, you don't want to be dressed up or dressed down or out of sorts. Ask those kind of questions. When in doubt, go with black and white. Those are always in your favor. Black suit, white shirt, white shirt, black tie. Ladies, something the equivalent of that. You can't go wrong with it. Here's what I do. When I'm at a wedding, I make remarks as the minister. If I'm the main one, if I'm the one officiating the wedding, I make personal remarks for the bride and the groom. Even if I don't know them very well, I try to find some way to make some personal remarks. Again, I never tell any stories that are embarrassing to them, never do anything like that. I talk them up. I honor them, and I make some personal remarks. I always use their first names. I put their first names into my notes. I use their first names. I try to make it as personal as I can. Then after I've made some personal remarks, I make some biblical remarks. I don't preach what I would say a sermon. I make biblical remarks. I take a text, I make some remarks on it. Usually I'm in Ephesians chapter 5 about husbands and wives. I try to personalize that. I try to put their first names in it. I try to make it about them. And then you lead them in the exchanging of rings and vows. Have a good set of vows. There's all kinds of ministerial handbooks that you can find that have good sets of vows. Find some classic ones, some good ones, and try to stick with those unless the couple has something else in mind. And for the love of all that's holy, don't use AI to write your remarks for weddings and funerals. Be a human being, okay? It's a good time to be a human being. Very human things are taking place, and so be a human being. Everyone can tell the difference. Just be you, pray about it, prayerfully prepare, and be a human being. You've been invited to be a part of that special service. The computer has not. So be you and be thoughtful and be prayerful about it. So, any questions about weddings or funerals before we move on? We've got just a few more minutes. Okay, let's talk about baby dedications for a minute. Baby dedications can take all kinds of forms. You can do them on Sundays. A lot of times they do take place on Sunday morning during a worship service. The general guidelines apply. Preparation is key to prepare for a baby dedication. There's all kinds of ways to structure a baby dedication into a Sunday service. You might, some of Brother Wilford's notes included these kind of things that you might consider. You might consider the name of the child, the meaning of the name of that the parents have given the child. It might have some special meaning that you can weigh in on and include in your remarks. There might be special circumstances for the child or the family regarding the birth of the child and just the way that the family's history has gone. You might pick a special scripture to use to kind of, very thoughtfully speak over that child and that family at that point in their life. You might also, if your church wants to, you might have a certificate of some kind where you can date it and sign it and just kind of mark the occasion that there was a baby dedication that took place. Those are all good things to do. And so I won't say much more about baby dedications because there's kind of a wide range of how to do it, but those are some things you might consider in your preparation for a special service like that. I like to make a record of the special services that I do. So maybe you have a way of listing out the weddings and funerals and baby dedications that you're involved in. I like to do that. So let's talk about a communion service. If you're leading a communion service, that can kind of be a different kind of a service that we It might not be a typical run-of-the-mill service for you. If you're going to host a communion service and lead a communion service, you're going to have to, ahead of time, you're going to have to prepare the elements, the juice and the bread. You're going to have a way in place to distribute those elements, when those are going to be distributed, how they're going to be distributed, who's going to do it. You're going to have to think through all of that ahead of time as you prepare for a special communion service. You're going to have to think through what else is going to feature in that service. So what kind of songs? What's the order of service going to be? Are there going to be any other speakers that are going to speak during the communion service? So preparation is key for that. Last but not least, let me say a couple words about church business meetings. Church business meetings are another kind of special service that we all just really look forward to. I know we do. So I bring those up because the general guidelines that we mentioned at the beginning, they match up for the business meeting as well. Preparation is key. And so business meetings are required annually per the laws of incorporation. They should be conducted according to the bylaws of your local church. They should be conducted in accordance with Robert's Rules of Order. That way you have a format to use. They have to be announced usually 10 days in advance, usually multiple times within 10 days. And they're usually scheduled at the discretion of the pastor unless your bylaws stipulate that they have to be held at a certain time of year. So when you get Brother Williford's resources, you'll find that he has some resources for you regarding preparing for business meetings. I think you will find them very helpful. I know I have. So you have a checklist of things that you have to prepare. You have to prepare the materials for the business meeting, the documents, the reports, the bylaws, the manual, the files, the Robert's Rules of Order, all the agenda, all those kinds of things. And so when you do a church business meeting, the past minutes have to be available. That's not an option. I know sometimes you may maybe you sat through Wednesday morning and you noticed that they had to make the minutes available. That is not just a formality, that is a requirement. And so you have to have those available. You have to have a secretary that's ready to record the meeting minutes. That's not something you want to think about during the meeting or after the meeting and be like, oh boy, we didn't record any minutes. You want to have someone that's ready to do that. So, and last but not least, you want to be familiar with all the reports that are going to be given. So if there's a financial report that's going to be presented, if there's any kind of things that are going to be discussed regarding the operations of the church, that's something that if you are leading the business meeting, you're leading that special service, you want to be familiar. You don't want to be hearing that information for the first time, because if anyone has to field questions about it, it's going to be you. So you don't want to go on the fly. That may seem obvious, but if you've ever had to go on the fly with something, it's not a good feeling, and it's really not a good feeling at business meetings. So any thoughts or questions? There's a lot of material we covered. I'm sorry I've done a lot of the talking, but are there any questions about special services of any kind? Yes, Brother Luke.
Do you have any advice or resources for a pastoral installation service?
You know, off the top of my head, no, I've never personally conducted one. I've only been involved in a limited number of them. The ones that I've been involved in, they've involved a couple different speakers, usually. And it's usually a mix of the personal and the, how do I say it, the spiritual authority and structural authority of that's involved in that person's life that's being installed in the family. There's been a time of prayer and the laying on of hands. I'm just thinking back to ones that I've been involved in. I don't have a lot of personal experience leading one of those or putting one of those together. I do know that I have some resources up here of mine that are ministerial handbooks, and there's others like them that are on the market that I know will have a lot of insight into something like that. So that would be just about all I'm qualified to weigh in on with that. It's a good question though, because that's another kind of that transitional transfer. That's a special service, and sometimes those only come around once in a generation. They don't come around very often at all sometimes. So, but they're important. They're very significant. Anyone else? Another question about special services? Sorry I wasn't able to be more particular in my answer about that one. That was a good question. I would advise you, if you have Brother Williford's contact information. Brother Williford, I know, has been involved in many of them. You might reach out directly to him. He'd be a great resource for that. So, here's what I'll say. Last but not least, it's time to reach a point of dismissal. If you know somebody and you are around people that are doing special services, and you know that you trust them and you know that they do them well and they have a lot of experience in doing them, pay attention to how they do it. A lot of times we can find ourselves sitting in a special service or any kind of service, and we take for granted that the person leading the service is they're just flowing with it. They're prepared, they're flowing with it, they're sharing good things, and you're just like, wow, this is enjoyable to be at, this is really something, they're doing a great job. And then I found myself after the fact being like, boy, I wish that I had paid more attention, because now I have to do a wedding, and I've sat through a bunch of them by people that I trust, and I was just like zoned out. I was just zoned out. I was on another planet. And I could have been gleaning from these men of God, these people that were leading a funeral, leading a wedding, doing a baby dedication, all the, a business meeting, and I could have been gleaning from all that, and I wasn't. So I would say if you're in those kind of settings, be a student in all of those settings. You'll be glad that you did. There's things that you can catch in those moments without even having to have a conversation, without even having to be in a classroom with somebody. You can be in those kind of special services and you can glean quite a lot. I'm going to end with prayer. Thank you for filling out the clipboard. If you didn't have a chance to do that, if you came in, you haven't had a chance to do that yet, make sure that you find that and fill that out. That's what I'm going to use to relay resources to you that are things that Brother Williford passed on to me, and you will find them very, very helpful. I also have a few books up here that I wanted to bring in that are just from my library. There's a couple ministerial handbooks. There's a couple books that have some funeral messages that you might find helpful. You cannot have these. These are not for takes. These are mine. But you can look at them, and if it's something that you're interested in, maybe you can take a picture of it and you can find one and pick it up for yourself. One that kind of maybe doesn't fit the bill is this quick start guide to Robert's Rules of Order. If you get a Robert's Rules of Order book, it's going to be as big as a doorstop. You probably don't want the full unabridged version of it. But if you get one of these beginner's guides like I have, this is actually helpful. So if you're a beginner like I am when it comes to Robert's Rules and business meetings and stuff like that, you might find something that's the equivalent of this. You will find it to be very helpful, and you can kind of do things the way that it's supposed to be done.